I was probably 18, 19 at the time, refused entry into a bar or restaurant in the local area because I looked too drunk and red-faced and looked like an alcoholic. Actually, do you know what, sir? It's just an eczema flare. But I don't want to have that conversation with you. It's more about you than it does me. There's times where I've woken up at 3, 4 in the morning and got in my car and at the garage, wound down the windows, and 1-2 junctions on the motorway just for that cold air respite on my face.
See, stuff like this is so important that people hear this, because I think it's examples like that that really help to drive home how difficult this is to live with.
An autoimmune condition that impacts the largest organ of the human body, so it deserves to have the platform to help it get its recognition and help people. It's been transformative in some ways, and it's very much been a lifeline. It's definitely given me real relief from the symptoms I've lived with for decades.
Welcome to the Life with a Difference podcast, a platform to amplify the voices of those living with a visible difference, and also to provide relevant information from industry leaders and experts. Hello, James.
Andy.
How you doing, mate? You all right?
Nice to meet you. Virtually in person.
Finally, yeah, we're almost there, aren't we? We keep trying. We'll get there eventually.
Almost. And do you know what? For the first time in my post-pubertic years, I've been able to grow some facial hair without being itchy and the need to shave to moisturise.
Wow, nice.
I'm a bit patchy, but I said I'm going to try through Christmas.
I always get to about day 4 and then I just give up every time. Have you fought through the itchy, or has it just not been itchy at all?
So I tried twice and failed. This time it's been a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm kind of persevering, but yeah, I've got through some of the itch.
Are we going full Viking if you can get away with it, or what's the level?
No, I think I'll go to the new year and then I'll get bored of it, or my wife and kids will say it's too itchy, shave it off. The irony here of getting through the itch and also just being able to do it.
I religiously shave every 3 days. This is about as long as it gets. Otherwise, yeah, I just start to tear my face off.
Yeah, even though I hated doing it, one of the things I struggled with was wet raising, but I had to do it every day so I could get my emollient moisturiser on. But I never knew whether even the sensitive skin shaving foams and things were doing me any favours.
Yeah, I use the beard trimmer. That seems to help because it's off your skin by that little bit, so it's not actually like cutting your skin apart so much. That seems to be okay. Yeah. Wow. Do you mind just sort of briefly introducing yourself to my 0 listeners, if you don't mind, and a very brief idea of your condition, if you don't mind?
Andrew, thanks very much for inviting me to your podcast, Life with a Difference. I'm really privileged to be your second guest on the podcast. My name's James Hardwick, and I certainly have a life with a difference. I'm a lifelong eczema sufferer, or atopic dermatitis, as it's often referred to in dermatology.
Yeah, you're still on Dupi at the moment, aren't you? Dupilumab.
Yes. So I started a journey with Dupilumab going back nearly 2 years now, and it's been transformative in some ways, and it's very much been a lifeline. I can now feel my skin rather than fight it. And it's definitely given me real relief from the symptoms I've lived with for decades. But I would say the key thing is it's absolutely not a cure. And that's really important to acknowledge. It's a management for me. It's definitely reduced the incessant itch and flare-ups that I think one of the difficult things is you're always dealing with that emotional and physical toll that it leaves on you. It wreaks havoc through your life and also those loved ones that are close to you. So I'm making some really good progress. I think it's been an absolute phenomenal treatment, and I hope it long continues. I now know I'm dependent on this intervention. So it's about managing this lifelong autoimmune condition that impacts the largest organ of the human body, the skin. And yeah, I feel really blessed right now that actually this medication is working. After quite a traumatic and drawn out fight to get to where I am and be able to use this medication freely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to go back very slightly, me and James both did posts for the National Eczema Society. James was a lot more eloquent than mine. I had to Google a few of the words he wrote in his one. But we've both taken Dupilumab, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's and there's people who are a lot smarter who could explain this better than me. It's essentially a monoclonal antibody that blocks a certain protein which stops an inflammation response. Is that okay, James? Do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description. I think the key thing in simplistic terms is it targets the real specifics that flare your skin. It's not systemic suppressant. It's specific to the skin.
Yeah, because a few years ago, people like us would always be put on methotrexate, which is something that I was on. Were you on methotrexate at all?
Well, I was on 2 different systemic immunosuppressants. I couldn't actually have methotrexate. Well, I could have methotrexate actually. I chose to go down a slightly different path. I spent 5 years on a drug called azathioprine, which is a systemic immunosuppressant. And to give that some more deeper context, by that, I'll draw some parity with other conditions and things it's used for. So often used to treat cancer patients and people that may reject organs after donation. So it's quite a hard drug. It completely suppresses your immune system. I found myself on azathioprine on a small dose of 25 milligrams, and common story for lots of people with chronic and severe eczema. Titrating up the dose from 25 milligrams to just over 200, which was the max for my BMI at the time, and it became less effective and less impactful, and resultantly stopped working, which meant I found myself, of course, going on to another systemic immunosuppressant, which was something called myclophenolate mofetil, and I can tell you some of those side effects I would not wish upon anyone. And I only managed to be on myclophenolate mofetil for 2 months before I was considered a candidate for Dupilumab. So,
okay, what kind of side effects are we talking, if you don't mind talking about it?
Yeah, explicit trigger here, but one example is abscesses in places I wish to not describe on this podcast. Quite embarrassing, but other things that were more pervasive as well, such as constant night sweats. Like I would wake up and my bed would be sodden. Really severe insomnia, like literally not sleeping for days, which of course makes you extremely exhausted and debilitated. And they really are a hard treatment. It's a thing that you should really consider before you go on them, because the side effects are difficult and traumatic. That was quite an interesting case because especially the azathioprine, it worked really well to begin with. In fact, it was radical and life-changing, and my life was hugely different. But common story, as I've mentioned, the titration process just means your body's constantly feeding and becoming more reliant on that drug, and it's a matter of time before your body gets used to it, and it just doesn't work, unfortunately. So that's what happened to me.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate your honesty with that. I think it's really important for people to hear this kind of stuff, and it all plays into the all-encompassing nature of our condition, that it just affects absolutely everything. It's certainly, just in the way it affects the entire surface area of your body, it always also affects your mental health, your social relationships, your sexual relationships. It just affects absolutely everything. And we're quite fortunate in a way that, 100 years ago, we'd probably be covered in honey by the doctors or some leeches, and that'd be it. But 20 years, maybe 10 to 20 years ago, all that was available, maybe even 5 years ago, all that was available were these pretty hard drugs. For example, mine is methotrexate, which again is something used for people who have organ transplants. And the way someone described it to me is that it's a bit of a carpet bomb on your body. It attacks everything, suppresses everything. Whereas we're quite fortunate now in that all these new medications are coming through, which are a lot more targeted. And Dupilumab doesn't even require blood testing, which is pretty crazy. Because I came off methotrexate because I was in my mid-20s and I had elevated liver function. And there was no plan to come off it at that stage. And I thought, well, I can't go until the rest of my life on something that's already damaging my liver. But now, fortunately, all these new medications are coming through. And it's actually quite an exciting time, isn't it, to have a skin condition. This is a weird thing to say, but there's all these new things coming through. And unfortunately for my story with Dupilumab is that it was absolutely miraculous for about 6 months, to the point it was like I was cured. I just couldn't believe it. I thought, this is finally the thing, gone my whole life, put the work in and we're there. And then unfortunately it started to wear off, but that's kind of the exception. Most people like yourself seem to be getting some really good long-term results. So.
Yeah, and I think, look, when you live with something so relentless as eczema, you will try anything in the promise that it will give you some relief and some respite. And over the years, I've spoken to some of the most highly regarded people in UK dermatology, private and NHS. It's cost me a fortune over the years.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and people don't realise that financial burden as well. Right, that's really critical, but really it's just the surface level stuff. And these UK derm specialists have considered me to be one of the most complex cases they've ever seen, which is really radical. And one of the key stats or numbers that I often talk to people about to provide some context, because I think numbers bring meaning to things. You have something called an IgE level. So it's immunoglobulin in your blood. And a normal range for a normal person is considered to be between 1 and 10. Mine at times has been above 6,500.
I remember reading that on your post, the National Eczema Society. I thought that was a really important stat. Yeah, that really drives it home.
It does, and and that just shows how reactive body and blood is to allergens that basically that trigger the eczema. And just over the years, I've gone through countless treatments. You name it, I tried it. Mild to hard things such as diet, avoidances, light therapy, sleeping head to toe in wet wrap bandages, and ongoing use of topical steroid creams, emollients, bleach baths, injectable steroids like Kenalog, and all sorts of different things. And sure, they work for a while, but come with side effects and then ultimately diminishing returns. So, what really stands out to me in this process is how exhausting it is. And every treatment comes with hope. And when it fails, it just starts to kind of chip away at you. So the emotional
absolutely
trauma and toll of constantly trying to find something that works is one of the most difficult things in this process. And Dupilumab really has been a game changer.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's a constant experimentation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My mind is spinning about what it could possibly be. The way it will, I do everything I'm supposed to do, right? So I try and look after my skin in terms of sleep and managing stress and diet and etc. And the way it oscillates so dramatically, it's almost like I'm having a reaction to something, but I have no idea what that reaction is. I'm sure you're very used to that. And it's so difficult when there's so many potential cures out there, and there's quite a lot of charlatans as well, unfortunately. And I'm sure we've both tried some crazy stuff out of desperation, because when there's that weird cream that pops up for 20 quid, you think, well, it's worth a punt, isn't it? But then that accumulates and adds up and adds up. And as you said, financially, I put a water softener in our house a few months ago. That was $2,500. I bought a Dyson air filter. That was 600 quid. Every time I go into London, I'm going into London tomorrow. That's 100 quid on the train. It just really, really compounds. And because, as you say, because there's no perfect cure, you're always going to be in that cycle of trying to find that next thing. I've done some crazy diets. I did a carnivore diet for 10 days. I just ate meat. It's like the ultimate elimination diet, see if that would help. And yeah, I've done all sorts of crazy stuff. But I remember reading in your post that your parents even moved specifically to a new build house in order to avoid the risk of allergens. That's the kind of level we're talking.
Well, that's one of the things that we did actually go back 8 years, and you wouldn't typically choose a new build house, but actually one of the key things that I'm allergic to that triggers my eczema is pet dander. So that's basically the saliva and skin that comes off your typical home pets, dogs, cats, rabbits, etc. And just to be absolutely sure that there'd never been pets in a home before, we chose a new build. Because the dander can get into the cavities for years and years. Even doing a refurb and renovation, ripping up carpets, doing things like that, you will never fully get rid of the dander and spurs from animals, which is a massive trigger. You're onto something really unique as well there, because actually my largest trigger from eczema is house dust mites, which is quite common in the UK. So it often means lots of leather furnishings, which again come with expense. Not many carpets, largely hard furnishings. Washing bed sheets every single day on 60 degrees.
Yep.
And then various other considerations as well. You touched on travel and commuting there. Dust and heat, real trigger for eczema. One of the things I find difficult, especially if I'm in a flare-up, is commuting to London as well, that you spoke about. So getting public transport, a train, and especially the tube, gosh.
Man, the tube. These people, you look at some of them and they're in a full coat.
Well, yeah, I think I wrote in my National Eczema Society post, if you see me in a white shirt, I'm having a good skin day. It doesn't take a genius to work out why. But Dupilumab has actually allowed me to pull on the odd white shirt. So again, very, very grateful for that.
It's funny, those big moments that most people wouldn't even think about. I didn't wear a short sleeve t-shirt until I was 16, just because I was so conscious of my arms, and that's something that not a lot of people would think about. But my face would go very red if I was hot. So in the summer, I'd have long sleeves, but then my face would go red. And it's very much a catch-22. I liked it in your blog as well when you spoke about cold and fresh air seemed to really help, and I totally related to that. I used to drive to work to Milton Keynes for about an hour with the aircon full blast. I'd turn up to work like shivering and sniffling, but my skin wasn't quite as sore, so it was worth it.
Absolutely. And I reflect on some of the nights where the nights were really long and dark, and you wake up with that incessant itch and flare up. Been countless times where I've woken up at 3-4 in the morning and I've got in my car and burst out the garage, wound down the windows, and 1-2 junctions on the motorway just for that cold air respite on my face.
See, stuff like this is so important that people hear this, because I think it's examples like that really help to drive home how difficult this is to live with.
Absolutely. And the school thing, I think, is really critical as well, because my hope is that we will have some younger people listening to this podcast as well. And I think the teenage years, that they are hard enough without carrying the weight of invisible conditions, especially in school, where unfortunately I think your appearance is very much your currency and different liability.
All you have is social capital then, isn't it? That's all you have.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's just the law of the jungle. It's in my opinion, it's the hardest time. I think it all comes with different challenges, but I think that teen years into early 20s is the hardest time, I think.
And you imagine walking into a classroom knowing that the first thing people see is your skin, your face, or you remember. Not something you can hide. It's on display. People notice it. So, school for me, my eczema fluctuated quite a lot. Various different triggers, all the stuff I've mentioned, from environmental, but things like stress as well, exams, that type of thing. And I constantly remember feeling like my skin defined me, and at times, that really, really difficult, but you have to try to look through that and really constantly remind yourself, actually, the skin doesn't define you.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Mm. I always try to massively downplay it, which is ridiculous because it's something that's plastered all over your face. But I would always kind of make out it wasn't a big deal. It didn't matter. It wasn't, it wasn't a weakness. It wasn't a part of me. And I found it so incredibly liberating over these last, couple of years or so, stepping into advocacy, just to be more accepting of me and this is me and letting people know this is what I'm dealing with. I just find it easier that way. But that's a lot easier said than done when you're a bit older than when you're at school, when the last thing you want to show is any kind of weakness, and the last thing you want to do is stand out. So it is a very difficult situation. I've got a call with Susie Holland, who's CEO of Eczema Outreach Support, in a few weeks, and she focuses almost entirely on the youth age range. And I think that's just so important because that is the hardest part for sure. How was your support network growing up? Did you have people you could sort of lean on?
Yeah, I think my support network. So I guess if I look at my family, they deeply cared, especially my mum, who struggled for most of her life with eczema. But
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, and it's largely hereditary, and that's definitely where I got it from my mum's side. But I think, like so many others, friends, teachers, uni lecturers, colleagues, sports coaches, most of them, I would say, struggle to understand what living with eczema really means.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain the relentlessness of it, the itching, the pain, the night spent awake, constant feeling of being trapped in your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
They want to help, but the advice often just feels like, can't get on with it. And, the stigma and challenge with eczema is that everyone's heard about it. Everyone knows eczema in some form, but the stigma around it is that it's just patches of dry skin that's cosmetic. It's a little bit, and yes, for a significant portion of eczema sufferers, that's absolutely the case. But those that find themselves at the more severe end, actually, is completely life-changing, and that's not the practical reality of what living with severe and chronic eczema.
That's something that we have to absolutely blast through somehow, through advocacy and through getting the message out. And, some of the things that you've shared is that, there's this massive spectrum. And for some reason, we're all seen on this one side where you get a little bit of a rash on your arm and not on the other extreme side. And I think, sharing stories like yours and mine will help to change that a little bit and show how all encompassing it is and how it just negatively impacts absolutely everything. And if we're being, really real about it, suicide is the biggest killer of people under 35. And to think that wouldn't be a significant contributing factor, at least, is a bit naive, I think. Something that makes you feel totally isolated, just completely different to everyone else. You experience plenty of bullying. You just have low feelings of self-worth. You get to that age where you start dating and the girls or boys don't want anything to do with you, and you can't help just feeling like a complete outsider. And so, I think it's so important, your story.
Yeah, and I think it's just really is challenging. And if I look at kind of the past couple of decades and going through and into a professional career and trying to think more forward looking and aspirationally at how employers tend to think about supporting visible differences, especially things like eczema. I don't think those visible conditions are really included in the DE&I conversation yet. They exist almost in this grey area, kind of the middle part of the Venn diagram, if you like, that they're not always seen as disabilities, but have a profound impact on the way we navigate the world.
Yeah.
There's a massive focus on visible diversity, like race and gender, which is super, super important. But I think we really need to expand that conversation, and with real conviction as well, to include chronic conditions and visible differences. If they shape our experiences just as much, and they deserve to be recognised.
Mm-hmm. It's obviously a little bit tricky because you're still there. But I was hoping that PwC, a company that big, would be progressive enough to have us as part of the EDI conversation. But do you not believe that we are yet, even at that? Because I think it always comes from the big corporations and trickles down. I was an electrician for a long time. It takes a long time for progressive attitudes to trickle down to those kind of industries. But yeah, I was hoping at the top level that would be there, but do you not think it quite is yet?
So I think broadly, PwC have been very supportive overall. But I think there's just such a long way to go in normalising visible conditions. There's lots of stigma. People don't fully get it, as I've said before. And the key thing is when you want to ask for certain accommodations, you feel vulnerable. You feel like you're exposing a weakness, as you've alluded to, especially in an environment that prioritises high performance. There are policies there that there's really unspoken pressure to just get on with it, which can make it really difficult to ask or to know what you really need. So it's a very precarious and delicate balance. You've got to be professional whilst advocating for your own health and well-being. And so
it's such an impossible balance and act, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've done to be really proactive and just again around that patient advocacy piece and helping others and paying back. I co-founded our eczema community that started in the UK about 9 months ago, and we've got nearly 100 community members now.
This is within PwC?
Within PwC specifically.
That shows how massive PwC is, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's really nice because it's a safe space for people to share ideas, ask for help, ask certain questions, be vulnerable and authentic.
Yeah.
And it's a really trusted space where people are willing to put their hand up, ask questions. We've helped a lot of people. We've done some face-to-face meetings.
Brilliant.
And we're always looking to have more deeper and meaningful conversations. And my hope is that all of that community, if not some of them, will tune into your podcast.
I hope so. Yeah, if any of them are watching, hello. Yeah. Always appreciate a subscribe.
Absolutely. I know they'll really love it, and it will deeply resonate. And one of the key things I think that I take from that community is actually empathy is so important, but not just surface level empathy, like the real body stuff, where you deeply understand what someone is going through. And there are so many adjacencies as well, right? The eczema community that we've built, it's not officially part of our Dawn network. So we have a disability awareness network that covers a spectrum of different things. Not officially part of that, could become officially part of that. And I think we will be over the next 12 months, which again, I think is a real big step forward to showing that eczema is recognised as a disability. And I always say this, it probably sounds like a bit of a platitude at times, but it's an autoimmune condition that impacts the largest organ of the human body, which is skin. So it deserves to have the platform to help it get its recognition and help people.
Which is something I never understand why it doesn't get the attention it deserves and the concession it deserves, is because it's something so obvious. It's so dramatic and it's there for everyone to see. And as you say, I just think there's sometimes a lack of empathy to the reality of if you were in that person's shoes, because it's not just the aesthetics, it's everything else. You're sitting there and 80% of your cognition is taken up by the fact that you feel like you're being eaten alive and you're on 2 hours sleep and etc. etc. So it's frustrating, even with healthcare providers. What is your opinion of the healthcare industry, I guess, in the NHS sphere in terms of helping people with eczema?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I've tried NHS and I've tried private. I think the reality is that this is a perpetual battle with your own body and a constant negotiation with pain, exhaustion, and doubt. For a long time, I felt it hard to be heard and believed by healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm.
The NHS, fantastic, it had incredible support, especially when I reached the stage of accessing the Dupilumab, but the journey to get there really easy. And the reality of the NHS system, for all it's great and good, it's not designed for the persistence of conditions like mine, eczema. It treats the symptoms, but rarely the person. And to your point, like the severity of eczema, it's not just the skin, it's pervasive through life. It impacts your mental health, your relationships, your family, your friends, your work. And broadly, I think the healthcare system struggles to fully grasp the complexities of that. And so some wonderful and standout individuals and dermatology team at my local NHS hospital now that I'm under, fantastic. But I think there's just such a long way to go. It really is.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. As you say, some wonderful people. You know, I'm fortunate to be able to go into London, which is a bit of a trek, but it's absolutely worth it to go to Guy's Hospital. I'm going tomorrow, actually. And to be under, you know, there's professors there. Professor Smith, particularly, is just lovely and, you know, just very much knows her stuff. But there's a big disparity between care, I think, in different areas. And that's why people travel from far and wide to come all the way to London, unfortunately, to get the care they need. I was with this particular dermatologist locally for a long time who essentially said, we're out of ideas, sorry. And then I went to London and they said, you haven't even started. So it can be a bit frustrating in that sense. And I've heard from a reliable source that dermatologists have to keep constantly retraining and learning about the newest medications. And some dermatologists haven't done the work to be able to prescribe Dupilumab. And so you'll go and see a dermatologist and they'll say, you know, we don't know what to do for you, essentially, because they haven't carried on their training. And hearing that is very, very frustrating. You know, I think it's your responsibility to stay on the ball. And it's not as if Dupilumab is some obscure little medication. This is a huge breakthrough thing that's helping a lot of people. So hearing stuff like that can be quite frustrating.
Yeah, that's quite deflating because this is one of the most progressive medicines in dermatology, and it's been a step change for many people. The anecdotal evidence that I hear from speaking to my clinical practitioners is that there is a really, really high success rate with this to eczema individuals. And you're right, the whole going further afield to bring in a broader perspective is very true. I almost see my life being relived through my two little boys who are 5 and 2 as we record this podcast, and my 5-year-old probably in a slightly more severe state than the younger one, again with a number of allergies as well. I've had to advocate for him in a really strong way, and in order to get under a paediatric specialist for derm and eczema, he's travelling to Manchester and to be able to do that. And my hope is that actually we can cut out some of the nonsense that I have found in my journey, kind of crudely speaking, and really just be pointed about what the specific treatment plan and pathways are for him in a safe way. And there's so much to consider. It's really challenging. I'm just embarking on that journey. But the other thing I do reflect on is actually, you know, giving him the confidence to also advocate for himself as a 5-year-old in school for other children that might observe that he's a bit fidgety, constantly scratching. He's like, why'd you wear a long sleeve top underneath your PE shirt? Things like that, you know, that children start to pick up on, but is there to protect him and give him a quality of life that he needs to protect his skin. But like me, you know, he will be in a position where he knows no different, unfortunately, because he's had it for his whole life. So you kind of, unfortunately, the reality is you have to get on with it, but you have to that right level of comfort blanket and wrap around you to give you the confidence to advocate for yourself and make people aware that, you know, can be a bit challenging, and it's just slightly different life and the ways dealing with conditions like this do require intervention and treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could embarrass you for a minute, I had a little stalk of your LinkedIn yesterday, and I didn't realize you were such a big cheese. Customer experience director of Oracle. You co-founded a company that was acquired in 2018, and I think that it's really important people like you who are, despite it all, going off and achieving big things. And that's not to take anything away from someone who's, a burn survivor and their Mount Everest is just being able to go outside and face the world. Whatever your standard is, that's obviously amazing. But I think it's really good for people to see people like you who are going off and doing these big aspirational things. Your career seems to be primarily in customer experience, which is obviously I imagine quite customer facing. I think that's kind of like the opposite of what a lot of us would do. So you all want to just run away and hide and be in IT or something. So was there something particular that drew you to that, and did that come with quite a lot of obstacles or challenges?
Yeah. Okay. I think really relevant point. I think the key thing I would say is I know what it's like to feel unseen or judged. That really shaped how I approach any type of interaction. Working in customer experience or CX, as we often say, has often been a way to reclaim kind of visibility for myself, but also create a space where people feel valued and understood. And that real deep customer, employee, patient, whatever it may be, experience, interaction, meaningful connections. It's not about hiding. It's about using the resilience that you've built through your own challenges to connect with other people in a meaningful way. And some of the people I've met on my eczema journey, yourself included, I hope we'll be friends for life, and I hope I can help and provide courage to those people. The eczema community in PwC and some of the work we do with our alliance ecosystem has helped me to fast track a couple of people to getting on Dupilumab, help me help someone settle in a different country, coming over with no integration into an NHS system and work out how to navigate certain eczema treatments and various other things. So I guess using my story as a way to just build courage and provide a platform for others. I think to know you're not alone. It's really key. But the customer facing thing, I think, at times it's hard. It can be, especially when you've had a flare up. I think certain people understand, others don't. And it's been about building fortitude, I would say. And if the reality is that there are treatments there are medications there, but trying to be resilient and have that level of fortitude has helped me. It's not going to be as easy for other people, and at times those days have been really dark. Like, not every day's been great, but Dupilumab as a medication has really helped me, especially over the last 2 years, kind of push through some of those really awful skin days that have grounded me. But it makes me very grateful for life. There are people out there that struggle far worse with other visible conditions. Like you say, you use the example of a burns victim, and everyone's unique. And what I would say is never ever hide away from trying to have a conversation with someone that's visibly different. Treat them with kindness and respect. Don't stare, and certainly don't avoid them. If you're curious, ask questions, but only if the person's open to be spoken to about it. And the most important and critical thing I would say is don't reduce someone to their condition. People with visible differences definitely want to be seen and not pitied or defined by what's on the outside. So use it as a way to connect. I can think of countless examples where I've tried to be bold and approach people about certain visible things and with deep empathy and knowing what I've been through before. Some have gone really well, and others, there are times where people will not want to talk about that. So just be very, very mindful of that. And again, kindness and respect, I think, are the two critical ingredients when you're trying to approach what you may think could be a difficult conversation, but actually many people with visible differences would really relish the opportunity to talk to someone else with empathy that understands and has perhaps trodden that path or seen someone else that's trodden that path.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was going to be one of my questions to you actually. I think I might ask everyone this question. I was pitching to a charity committee of Changing Faces last week, and one of the guys there, it was like an investment fund, and he said he works with a guy he's quite good friends with, and he has alopecia, and every time he sees him, he's losing more and more hair. He said, I want to say to him, I'm here for you if you need anything. I'm sorry you're going through this, etc., etc. He says, but I don't want to bring it up. If he doesn't want to talk about it, then I don't want him to think that I'm sort of ignoring what he's going through. So what would be your guidance? And in my opinion, it's a very nuanced situation, and it depends if you've known the person 20 years and they're your best friend or whatever. But I think as a general rule of thumb, to push within the visible difference community in terms of interacting with someone with a visible difference is wait for their invite to talk about it. I think don't talk about it unless they bring it up, unless they offer that invitation to. I think that's the way to play it safe, because there's a very good chance they won't want to talk about it. They're not comfortable to. They're just trying to get through the day. They don't want to go over it again. But yeah, as you say, at the very least, please be tactful and kind. There was I need to find his name, but there was on Face Equality International, there was a guy who did a poem in a reel, and one of the lines in that was, you speak about my face as if it's not connected to my heart. I thought that was really quite powerful. You're not talking about something on someone's arm, you're talking about someone's face. That is so emotive, and so that situation needs to be navigated with all the empathy that you can use.
Yeah, it's really poignant. And the point about the face, it's the place where it most impacts people. I will to anyone, my struggles come with when it's visible on my face. I can cover my whole body, head to toe, but I always see my face when I'm in the office, when I'm in the street, when I'm in school playground, or I'm doing a sport, anything. Your face is visible. And to your original question around approaching these differences with the right sensitivity, I think finding a safe space to do that and asking for permission is the right thing to do. Approaching with curiosity and kind of finger pointing or real kind of bold, oh, I've noticed this. I'm super curious about this because this also impacts me. I think it's similar or adjacent to perhaps what you're experiencing. It is difficult. It's so sensitive. Read the situation, read the room, read the individual or individuals, and create that safe environment, definitely, where you can have those conversations. And absolutely, if someone doesn't want to talk about it, then respect their privacy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'd agree. I feel like we have a little bit of a complex situation in that. So people like Chelsea, who I did the podcast with a few days ago, and some others, I feel like if someone was to negatively comment about their appearance, they're just a terrible person, and it kind of makes the situation a little bit straightforward because they're just an awful person. Whereas I feel like with our symptoms, it shows as redness, and I feel like in society it's kind of okay to make jokes about people being red because it's just, oh, they're just burnt or whatever, and it's okay to just throw a casual remark out there as banter. But what people don't realise is that they're actually making a comment about a chronic condition that we're deeply suffering with. I feel like that makes the situation a little bit more complex because it often doesn't come from a place of particular malice. So yeah, this question has kind of jumped to my mind. In that situation, so this situation happens, you're with someone and they say, oh, wow, you've really caught the sun. I instantly feel very embarrassed, and my brain is spinning, and I've got the choice to either laugh it off, and to end that situation as quickly as possible, or I educate them. They feel usually pretty mortified. The situation goes on longer than it needs to. and it's just horrible. How do you address that situation?
Good question, and I think really good summary of the two prospective outcomes. You make someone feel a little bit uncomfortable, and you point out, advocate for yourself, or you laugh it off. I would opt for the former, and I would be very bold and just point out, actually, this is part of my eczema, suffering a little bit in a minute, skin's flared up. Do you want to know anything more about it?
That usually makes them shrink, I bet, a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And that's just my personal approach. But look, if you went back, 15, 20 years, I would have probably gone with the latter and just kind of laughed it off. I mean, I can give you countless examples, and one that stands out is, I was probably 18, 19 at the time, refused entry into a bar or restaurant in the local area because I looked too drunk and red-faced and looked like an alcoholic. Actually, do you know what, sir? It's just an eczema flare. But I don't want to have that conversation with you. It's more about you than it does me.
You're so embarrassed. You just want the situation to be over, don't you? You just want to get out of that environment.
So, yeah, it's challenging, and I think advocating for yourself and for others is important. It's always difficult, and again, I suppose it depends on the situation and the people. It's a tricky one, but I'd always try and advocate to myself or out the curiosity of the other person if it was not with any malice intent.
Yeah, my therapist says that someone needs to be embarrassed in that situation, so why should it be you? And I kind of think, yeah, fair enough. They've not been particularly considerate or thoughtful, so if they feel a little bit embarrassed about that. Another thing that helped me a little bit was she said, because I never, when those comments came, I could never judge I struggled to judge how much malice there was and whether I was just being too sensitive, too dramatic. I just needed to just relax about it. And so she said, instead of it being at you, pretend it was at someone you loved. So pretend, for example, your wife had a chronic skin condition and someone had said that to your wife. How would you react? And I found that a lot easier to judge my response, if that makes sense.
Interesting. It gives you a slightly broader perspective. It enables you to step back, and I would presume, based on that, you would probably be a little more defensive, if that's all right.
It's a bit more firm, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm me too as well, I think. So I think that's really, really good advice, actually. And that's something that I'm going to take away from this great podcast.
Thank you. Just as a last couple of questions, do you have any general guidance for anyone suffering with eczema? Any sort of practical tips? You'd mentioned earlier about cold air really helps. This was part of why I really wanted to do this, is that I started doing all the advocacy projects. It's often for big pharmaceutical companies. I know you've done some work with Sanofi and the big charities, and they're so tied down with regulation that it can sometimes be a bit vague and a bit general in order to prevent them being opened up to any kind of risk. So for example, like I'd have to say, you need to go and see your doctor and get a plan that works for you. It's that I do feel like there's a little bit of gatekeeping for obvious reasons. If anyone's seen Dope Sick, you can understand why these things are in place, but I do think that limits the information to people a bit too much sometimes. So yeah, anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying any practical advice you might have.
Yeah, and you know what? My advice is always definitely do not let it define you. That's really, really difficult, especially when the days and nights are long and it feels relentless. There is always options. Consider them. Consider them intently. I think the key thing that has worked for me, especially with my type of eczema, that perhaps is also a result of long-term use of steroid creams, which is a withdrawal symptom. Eczema state has changed. As it changed to become red and angry, as kind of you've described, Andrew, as well, getting out in the fresh air is really the only thing that gives me that immediate respite. cold showers have helped from time to time. A lot of people say actually don't shower. So again, on an individual basis, and just be kind to yourself. Like it's difficult. It's not easy. You'll have good days. You'll have bad days. You know, skin flare, it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. For some people, it could be years. Thankfully, I've never been at the years end of the spectrum, but I've had periods of many months where I just thought I'm not going to get any better here until I found Dupilumab. But it's definitely be kind to yourself. Try and find something unique that works for you. It's hard. It's not easy. Be kind. Don't let it define it.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. Just to throw in a few things that, because this is obviously quite close to me, because this is my difference. Compression is something that really helps me with the itch. So say if your arms are really itchy, so sports compression sleeves I find can really, really help with that. And then, yeah, in terms of the more serious systemic medications, I've gone through quite a lot of them, but try and have some hope in the fact there's a lot coming out. You know, it's not just Dupilumab, there's Tralokinumab, there's the JAK inhibitors, there's all sorts now to try. So there's a lot of hope now for people like us in terms of managing our conditions. Just as a last question, this is what I hope you saw this before I read this to you. This is one I nicked off Tim Ferriss. It says, if you had a billboard the whole world could see, what would your short message be?
Amazing. Message on a t-shirt. Yeah, I often use this one as well myself, and I have had some time to think about this. So my message on a billboard or a sandwich board would be, skin is only surface. Eczema is more than just an itch. See deep.
Perfect. That sounds great.
That
sounds great. I think you need some merch. I think you need to start making some t-shirts. I'd buy one.
We can do that. We'll promote the podcast on the back.
That's it. Yeah. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, James. I really, really appreciate it. I think your story's really important. You know, we all, in the visible difference community, we all suffer with varying conditions, but the underlying themes are all the same. You know, it's isolation, it's mental health challenges, but I think it's important to dig deeper into the specific conditions as well and see all the nuances there and all the different things we struggle with. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm
no worries,
and will amplify your podcast wherever.
Thank you very much.